and who you might dare to become. We live in a world that rewards the practical and punishes the playful. Grown adults are expected to trade curiosity for cynicism, imagination for efficiency, wonder for wisdom. But let me ask you something. What if the toy aisle was the last place you were ever truly honest about who you are? That's what this book is about. Not validation, liberation, reclaiming the spark, the totems, the truth. This is your permission slip to own what lights you up without apology or explanation. Because your collection? It's not clutter, it's code. A language of comfort, courage, identity, and memory, spoken in vinyl, resin, rubber, and articulation points. I'm not writing this as an expert or a guru. I'm writing this as a guy who once hid his collection behind closed doors because he thought professionals didn't play with toys. But I'll tell you what, I've seen grown men's eyes light up at the sight of a 1984 He-Man just like a kid on Christmas morning. Every time I set a figure on my desk, someone had a story to tell, a smile to remember, a spark to reignite. And that's the mission here, to light that spark in you. By the time we're done, you'll understand why that one figure keeps calling you back, why the thrill of the hunt is a form of prayer, why keeping your shelf isn't a sign of immaturity, it's a testament to survival, why putting away childish things doesn't mean purging play, it means letting go of ignorance. This is less a book about toys as it's really a book about you. Let's dig in. If the spark is real, where did it first flare up? Let's rewind to the plastic time machines that carried us there.
It's strange how some of the smallest things leave the biggest echoes. You might forget your first grade teacher's name, but you remember the feel of that Darth Vader figure's vinyl cape. You might not recall what you ate at your 10th birthday party, but you remember exactly how it felt when you picked out that Superman lunchbox, like choosing the vessel that would spirit you away to lunchtime and that peanut butter and jelly sandwich your mom packed. These weren't just toys, they were your first allies, your first therapists, your first mirrors. For me, it started with the smiling faces of my Saturday morning heroes. Superman, Batman, and Robin, as made by the Mego Corporation in the 1970s. While they weren't exactly dead ringers in likeness to the stars of the show, they still, unbeknownst to me at the time, were implanting a defense mechanism that ensured my sense of wonder, play, and adventure would never leave me. I could do anything with them in my hands, pockets, or beside me in the car on short or long road trips. Not because I was clinging to toys, but because I was unknowingly building an inner world. A world where problems could be worked out, villains could be defeated, and heroes always showed up. Another thing I didn't realize at the time was that what I was really building was a language. A symbolic code made of plastic and paint, storylines, and silence. These toys were encoding values into my imagination long before I had words for them. They were training me. Even now, if I close my eyes and reach back, not just with memory, but with feeling, I can see those moments like they're still happening. I can feel the pop of the blister pack opening, hear the sound of a cape swishing in the air, smell the faint chemical scent of vinyl mixed with afternoon light and carpet fibers. These toys weren't things. They were companions. They were teachers. They were consistent. Most importantly, they were there even when Saturday morning was another 6 days away. And in all of this, they were becoming totems that would forever fuel and assist in my learning how to do so many things: writing, video production, graphic design, and a dependable troupe of actors who were always on time, never needy, and always ready to get the job of learning done. And they're still here, ready to help. Because no matter how far we may have traveled from those early years, the toys magically remember where we started, patiently waiting for us to get off the bus and get back to our rooms. And when they're needed, they can speak to us every day from our desks, shelves, and walls. That's my experience, at least. Perhaps if you let go of the limitations, you'll find that yours can and do the same for you. Those early echoes weren't random. They formed a rhythm. Next, we'll see how play itself became our first sacred ritual. This is the podcast Every morning I go live to help you start the day with more clarity, creativity, and momentum. I'm Jim Bumgardner, and this is the home base for everything I build through AMP Multimedia. You'll get mindset resets, real talk, and behind the scenes as I grow 3 pillars. Toys are totems, the book and philosophy about reclaiming your spark. The Evergreen Content Engine, a simple system to create content that actually sells. And the Virtual Stump, a civic project built to help our community connect without the noise. If you want a better day, a stronger message, and more ownership over your life and work, subscribe and jump in live.
Before we ever had words for ritual or routine, we had play. You didn't need to understand the definition of symbolism to know that every time you lined up your figures or built a fortress out of couch cushions, you were setting a scene. Marking sacred ground, building a world where rules bent to imagination and stories made sense, because you made them make sense. You weren't just playing, you were conducting ceremony. Those loops you ran, the battles you replayed, the familiar voice patterns and sound effects, that wasn't repetition for the sake of it, it was repair. That was you working something out, rewiring neural pathways, translating the noise of the outside world into manageable miniature narratives. If you've ever repeated the same figure pose over and over, adjusted your shelves to just right order, or caught yourself scripting an epic saga in your mind while the rest of the room watched TV, congratulations. You were practicing your own form of subconscious survival. As kids, we'd sit on the floor, legs crossed, and dive into our personal universes. Maybe it was a Jedi showdown. Maybe it was Barbie leading a rebellion against a tyrannical substitute teacher. Maybe it was G.I. Joe getting existential in a bathtub full of Legos. Whatever the plot, we were channeling feelings, fear, anger, curiosity, even loneliness into tangible form. You might not have known it then, but this was your first form of emotional alchemy. And here's the part that matters. You weren't mimicking TV shows. You were remixing mythology, personalizing legends, assigning new meaning to archetypes because your brain already knew what you needed. Toys gave us safe parameters to explore big themes. They were manageable avatars for chaos and courage. Through them, we practiced decision-making, empathy, consequence, and redemption. And it felt fun because it was. But it was also something else. It was prayer in disguise, the kind of prayer where you don't fold your hands, you open them, and even if no one else ever told you this before, that counts. So if you ever find yourself reaching for a figure on your shelf, not to play maybe, but just to hold, don't downplay that moment. That's not regression. That's not weird. That's ritual. Your hands remembering something your mind forgot to honor. Ritual gives it power. Symbols give it meaning. An altar of alignment. I can admit it now. I was a sloppy kid. I didn't really care or concern myself with my room being a mess. Things all over the place, not a problem. Just step over it or push it to the side. However, when it came to my Star Wars action figures, they had to be lined up in perfect order. Just like you'd see the garrisons of stormtroopers in the movies waiting for Vader or the Emperor's inspection, here is a totem snapshot. The lineup, what looked like play, was actually prayer in formation. I would set them up and just stare at them. There was something about the order, the symmetry, the calm, and the chaos. My room might have been a disaster, but that display, that was sacred space. I didn't realize it then, but I was building an altar, practicing my first ritual, creating order from the noise, not in the room, but inside me. To this day, my office may be a mess, but my figures, they still stand at attention, giving me a point of zen to focus on when things get tiring, ready to read your own collector DNA.
Every collector has a pattern, even if they don't know it yet. That's the secret most people miss when they talk about toy collecting like it's some generic hobby. They assume it's all about trends or nostalgia, but if you zoom in close enough, you'll find something more. A blueprint, a psychological map, a living, breathing decoder ring of the soul. And the toys you're drawn to, they're not random. Some people are drawn to action figures, the heroes, the warriors, the icons of strength and resolve. Others lean toward vehicles and play sets, world builders who want context, terrain, control. Some collect villains because deep down they're trying to understand their own shadow. Some seek oddities, sidekicks, background characters because they've spent a lifetime feeling like one themselves. These preferences aren't just aesthetic, they're subconscious code. Look at your shelf right now. What dominates it? Is there a theme, a tone, a personality type that keeps showing up? That's your totem pattern. And when you start paying attention to that pattern, something wild happens. You start to understand yourself a little more clearly. That row of vintage Star Wars stormtroopers might not just be about army building, they might represent your lifelong need for order in a world that's often felt chaotic. That worn-down Ninja Turtle you refuse to replace, maybe he reminds you that being beat up doesn't mean being beaten. That Barbie with the astronaut helmet, she might be your earliest model of limitless potential. Your collection isn't just a collection, it's a mirror. Each piece says something about what you value, what you fear, what you long to become, or what you're trying to protect. In the appendix, I'll walk you through a full totem decoder quiz. So for now, just keep that scorecard in your head. It'll guide the journal pages. But for now, I want to plant this idea. Your toys are talking. All you got to do is learn to listen. Surrounded by inspiration. Look around my workspace and you'll see more than toys. You'll see a blueprint. To my right, 4 8-inch Kiss figures stand tall. Ace, Paul, Peter, and Gene. They aren't just musicians, they're mentors in showmanship, branding, and fearless creative identity. Their presence is a constant reminder. Go big, go bold, be memorable. Behind me, tucked into a bookshelf cube, sits the full 2025 Goosebumps figure line. Truth is, I only wanted Slappy, the spooky kooky mascot of that whole weird, wonderful world, but they roped me in with a Build-A-Figure, Curly the sassy, pink mohawk-wearing skeleton, and I fell for it. FOMO won. Still, no regrets. That whole shelf radiates the haunted charm I love. Then there's a humble wooden Superman knockoff. He is a gift from my wife and daughter. Doesn't matter that it's not official. It matters that they saw me in it. That's the highest value any totem can hold. These pieces, they don't just fill space, they reveal it. Once you recognize the code, testimonies surface. Coming up, we explore how a single figure can preach a lifetime sermon.
Everyone has one figure that stuck, one memory that echoes, one character that somehow held more than just molded plastic. They held meaning. That's what this chapter is about. Not the shelf, not the collection, not even the brand. This is about the moment you realized a toy was more than just a toy. For me, it happened with Kiss. They weren't just a glam, shock rock band of my childhood, nor were they just a part of the soundtrack of my teen years in the late 80s, nor were they just a nostalgia show in the late 90s that my friends and I traveled a couple hundred miles to go see live when the 4 original members got back together for a night of music, showmanship, and explosions. The Kiss figures on my wall, both new and reproductions of the original 1970s line, represent the total package that I strive for in my own business as a creator of advertising, marketing, and promotional campaigns. The business of Kiss has had an impact on me long before I had a clue what those things were, but I do now. I know the power of those processes and strategies. Thank you, Ace, Peter, Paul, and Gene. Before the Frightful Four, though, there was Superman. Specifically the 8-inch action figure made by the Mego Corporation that debuted the year I was born in 1973. I'd like to think he was made solely for me alone. Okay, not really. However, the connection with this toy has been one that has motivated many things in my collecting hobby, but also in my motivation to never give up on a dream. This lesson comes from observing a fellow by the name of Paul Dr. Mego Clark. For many years, I watched as Paul went from making replacement parts for the vintage toys long since lost or broken to actually becoming the man who resurrected the actual Mego Corporation and recreated my beloved Superman. He modernized him, all the while keeping an eye on detail to not lose the original aesthetic that I can never forget. The lesson there: tenacity, determination, and persistence does indeed pay off. Truly, a little engine that could, metaphor, come to life. I've had the opportunity to connect and chat with Paul over the years in the fandom space. Very good conversations, but I'm not sure that he even knows how profound his efforts can be in motivating others to stay the course on a dream. I cite those 2 brands and toy types to hopefully show you they weren't just favorites. They were reflections. They are inspirations. They are motivational fuel. And as soon as I realized that, I came to understand that they are very, Powerful totems, and you have yours. Maybe it's the busted up He-Man whose legs gave out 20 years ago but still sits in your garage toolbox. Maybe it's that first plushie you packed for every sleepover, even after you told your friends you didn't bring anything. Maybe it's the figure you never got, but still think about. The toys that matter don't need mint condition to hold meaning. They just need memory, emotion, connection. So take a moment. Think of yours. What's the one that still speaks to you when you pass it on a shelf or find it in a box? Or even better, when you spot it in the wild at a flea market, thrift store, or garage sale. Those are what hold your testimony that you can share with the world or just remind yourself with. And that story, it's more powerful than any collector's price guide will ever show. Evergreen energy. Many years ago, I think I may have been about 5 years old when my dad had picked up a stuffed dog for me. He was kind of generic in the way he looked and was designed. I recently came across a photo of me sitting on my dresser holding it. In that flashback moment, I remember how well Blueberry felt in my arms. I took him everywhere, even had soda and other miscellaneous stains on the white parts of his torso and face to prove it. Funny enough, I can't remember what happened to him, but in this moment of reflection, I can sure remember how he made me feel and smile, exactly like I'm doing right now. That's the power of a totem, an evergreen presence that can be recalled at any given time. Personal totems are one thing, mass market mythologies are another. Time to confront the brands that branded us.
You knew the logo before you could spell it. Before you ever understood marketing or brand loyalty, it was already happening. Not through lectures or textbooks, but through toy aisles, cereal boxes, cartoons, and cardboard play sets that folded out into whole universes. We weren't just buying toys, we were being invited into tribes. Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Barbie, He-Man, TMNT, Kiss. These weren't just product lines, they were mythologies. Not just brands, but belief systems, and they got in deep. You didn't just own a figure. You belonged to something. You weren't just playing, you were pledging allegiance. That's the magic of branding when it's done right. It's also the manipulation of branding done to right. Because those early connections, they formed neural grooves, emotional anchors, muscle memory that still fires off when you see a certain color scheme or hear the first two notes of a theme song. Now here's the thing, this isn't a warning. It's not some moral panic about the evils of advertising. I'm not here to demonize your fandom. Quite the opposite, actually. What I'm offering is this, a deeper look at how powerful those early bonds were and why they still echo through us now. When I saw the KISS logo, I didn't see a band. I saw electricity, rebellion, identity. When I held that Superman figure, I wasn't just holding a character, I was holding a code of conduct. When I watched He-Man yell, "I have the power," I wasn't just entertained, I was being handed a permission slip. That's branding. And in many ways, it worked because it gave us what we were looking for. Belonging, purpose, clarity, a symbol to hold on to when the real world didn't offer one. We didn't just love these brands, we were shaped by them. And the more you realize that, the more you can make peace with it and start to make it your own. Despite that imprint, culture told us to outgrow them. As such, cue the shame spiral. So this chapter isn't a critique, it's a reckoning, an acknowledgement that these brands left fingerprints on our identity. And maybe, just maybe, they gave us a foundation we can build on, not as blind followers, but as aware creators. Because when you understand how a brand formed you, you get to choose what you do with that power now. When branding meets adulthood, shame often sneaks in. Let's strip that away and reclaim permission to play. A universe expands. Some brands hit you before they even had lore. And to me, that's how you know it's real. The first brand that truly got me was Masters of the Universe. Before there was a cartoon, before I knew who He-Man even was, I had the toys. My mom picked up a big lot at a yard sale, including Castle Grayskull itself, before the franchise was even a thing. Then the Filmation cartoon dropped, and suddenly my figures had a voice, a story, a whole world to live in. I was hooked. Sure, I noticed the style differences between the toys and the show, but it didn't matter. One didn't cancel the other out, they completed each other. Even today, I collect both. The new Mattel lines that mimic the animation, stunning. But the vintage versions, they're still the ones that hum with that original spark. Masters of the Universe didn't just sell me a toy, it gave me permission to live in two versions of the same myth and love them both. Let's talk about shame.
name, not the obvious kind, not the stuff you can name outright. I'm talking about the low hum, the quiet self-editing, the internal voice that says, you should grow out of that. Don't let anyone see that on your shelf. This isn't what adults do. That voice, it's a liar, but it's a persistent one. It slips in through culture, through peer pressure, through the narrow definitions of what maturity is supposed to look like. Somewhere along the way, we're told that being a grown-up means cutting ties with the things that used to make us feel free. And so the toys go in boxes, or get sold, or shoved in the attic with a casual, hey, I'm over it. But are you? Because if you're reading this, I'd wager you're not. I'd bet there's still a part of you that lights up when you see a weathered toy shelf at a flea market. That part of you that slows down in the collectibles aisle. That still gets a weird rush when you hold a figure that means something to you. And I'm here to tell you, you're allowed. You are allowed to still love what you love, to still feel joy when your hands find a tiny piece of molded magic, to still arrange your shelf just so and feel a little spark of pride. That isn't immaturity, that's integrity. Because here's the truth most people miss. You're not clinging to your childhood. You're reclaiming your right to feel alive, to have anchors in a world that's increasingly chaotic, to remember who you were before the world told you who you had to be. So give yourself permission to play, to collect, to remember, to reimagine, to line your desk or your dashboard or your nightstand with symbols that make you feel something real. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to apologize for it. You just need to let yourself enjoy it. Because if the world could use anything right now, it's more people who aren't afraid to feel joy on purpose. With permission restored, the hunt resumes. But this time it's spiritual. Sharpen your senses. We're going treasure tracking. Haters gonna hate. So what? Psychologists like Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of ourselves we're taught to reject, suppress, or hide to fit in. When it comes to play, many of us absorb the message early. Toys are for kids, not adults. So we buried that joy, labeling it immature or embarrassing. But here's the kicker. What we repress doesn't vanish. It sneaks out sideways. That's how collecting becomes compulsive, or why shame flares up when someone mocks what lights us up. These aren't random reactions. They're echoes of a split self. Reclaiming permission to play isn't about acting childish. It's about healing the fracture. It's saying, that spark still lives in me, and it always mattered. When we own our shadow, it stops owning us. And play, once hidden, becomes a path to wholeness. For me, the moment came in my teenage years. A friend of mine chastised me about it, and I felt horrible. Postscript. While it took me way too long to get over that shame, but I did. And that dude is middle-aged and miserable. Last I saw him was years ago, moaning and groaning on Facebook. I win.
This is the Green Content Engine, and it's built for people who are tired of posting and praying. I'm Jim Bumgardner. I help independent businesses turn one idea into consistent content that builds trust, gets attention, and creates sales without burnout. On this show, I'll break down the exact system, how to turn one long message into multiple pieces, how to structure the hook, how to build a content schedule you can actually keep, and how to make your marketing feel human again. If you want content that works while you sleep, subscribe and start here.
Chapter 7. The Thrill of the Hunt. It starts with a feeling. You're scrolling eBay, walking a flea market, wandering a thrift store aisle you didn't plan on visiting, and then it happens. There it is, the one you forgot you were looking for, the one that hits like a jolt straight to the heart. Maybe it's the figure you lost in a move. Maybe it's the toy your cousin had and never let you touch. Maybe it's just one you never thought you'd see again outside of memory. And in that moment, your pulse jumps a little. That's not nostalgia. That's recovery. That's a part of you reconnecting with something you didn't even realize you missed. This is the hunt. And for those who get it, it's not about hoarding. It's not about filling space. It's not about chasing clout. It's about resonance, alignment, tracking down a missing part of your inner mythology and bringing it home. There's an art to it. The search is half instinct, half patience. You learn to dig, to ask the right questions, to scan a dusty bin for that glimmer of recognition. It's part detective work, part spiritual pilgrimage. And when you score, when you finally get it in your hands, that joy isn't childish. It's ancient, because every good hunter knows you're not just collecting things, you're collecting meaning. There's power in the chase, there's presence in the ritual, and there's healing in the moment where a forgotten part of you is remembered again. So don't downplay it, don't mock the hunt, because what looks like just another toy to someone else might be the exact reminder you needed that you're still in here, alive, curious, intentional. The thrill is real. The hunt is sacred. Spreading the joy in moments. It's not always about what you find. It's about who you become in the finding. Back in the late 90s, when Star Wars toys returned to the shelves, I had rekindled the flame of collecting toys alongside a fellow who was one of my assistant managers. We would spend some off days and sometimes extended lunches on what we called the Jedi Hunt, prowling for the next wave of action figures. It was a lot of fun, as we would come across so many new versions of characters or ones that had never been made before. It was a blast. Then came the day when I spotted for the first time the Minoc Hunt Cinema Scene 3-pack with Han, Leia, and Chewie, recreating one of my favorite scenes from The Empire Strikes Back. The coolest part, it was one of his favorites too, and he too was blown away. I ended up trading the dealer, who had them a boxed 12-inch vintage Mego Batman for both the sets he had. That was one fine Jedi hunt, as we both went back to the office as giddy as two kids in grown-up suits.
Chapter 8, Variant Madness and Compulsion. Let's talk about the edge. Every collector knows it, the moment where joy teeters into obsession, the point where the thrill of the hunt becomes the pressure to complete, the inner whisper that says, you need the other version too, and then the next one, and the one after that. Welcome to Variant Madness. This is the territory where collecting can cross the line from meaningful to mindless, where the spark starts to dim under the weight of checklists, scarcity panic, and manufactured exclusivity. Let's be clear, variants aren't inherently bad. Alternate sculpts, costume colors, reissues, they're part of the fun. They feed the imagination, they expand the universe, but when you start to feel like you're not enough unless you have them all, that's not collecting anymore, that's compulsion. And compulsion steals something sacred from the process, agency. You go from choosing your totems to being chased by them. It's no accident. Toy companies know exactly how to trigger this. Limited runs, blind boxes, vaulted editions. It creates a sense of urgency that feeds on the collector's soul. Suddenly, it's not about joy, it's about control. Fear of missing out, fear of being less than. But here's the thing most people don't tell you. You don't have to complete the set to be complete. You don't need every variation to validate your experience. The moment the hobby becomes a burden, or worse, a shame spiral, it's time to pause, to breathe, to ask, what am I really collecting here? Because the totem only works when you choose it, not when it owns you. Let yourself off the hook. Skip the rare one if it doesn't light you up. Sell the extras if they stress you out. Reclaim your space. Reclaim your spark. Because what matters isn't what's missing from your shelf. It's what's present in your heart. If obsession cages you, you end up living in someone else's dream. Ready to break out? Welcome to the Virtual Stump. This is a simple civic project with one mission: make it easier for voters and candidates to connect like human beings. I'm Jim Bumgardner. Here you'll find short candidate spotlights, community questions, and election season conversations that cut through the noise. No gotcha games, no drama farming, just clarity, who they are, what they're running for, and why you should care. If you believe local matters, subscribe, share, and use this as your hub. Well, it's Chapter 9, Trapped in Someone Else's Dream. It's a hard thing to admit. You stopped creating. You started curating. You traded your spark for the illusion of completion. You were supposed to be the storyteller, but somewhere along the way you became a shelf manager, a preservationist, a caretaker of someone else's universe. And hey, no judgment. It happens to the best of us. There's comfort in curation. Safety in knowing the rules of a world someone else already built. But if you're being honest, does it still feel like yours? Or are you trapped inside a dream you didn't author? Fandom is powerful. It can build identity, inspire careers, forge lifelong friendships, but it can also become a cage, especially when the stories you once loved start to feel more like obligations than inspiration. Maybe you felt it, the pressure to keep up with every new release, the shrinking joy of a once cherished franchise, the feeling that your own ideas keep getting buried under someone else's legacy. Here's your permission slip. You don't have to stay trapped. You can be a fan without being consumed. You can admire without surrendering. You can collect without silencing your own voice. And maybe it's time to tell your story. Dust off that notebook, pick up the camera, write the dialogue, build the diorama that doesn't recreate the scene but creates a new one, because your totems, they were never meant to be the end of imagination. They were the launch pad. So if you're stuck in someone else's dream, consider this chapter your wake-up call. Not to abandon what you love, but to rise up alongside it, to stop waiting for permission to create, and to stop measuring your worth by how many box sets you own. You are not a vault. You are not an archive. You are not an algorithm. You're a spark, and sparks make fire. So let's explore how your shelf is actually only telling half the story. Escape creates ripples, and ripples become maps. Let's chart how one spark can ignite a universe. Breaking the spell. Sometimes the dream isn't yours. Sometimes it's just the shelf whispering someone else's echo. The 8-inch action figures from Mego, those were my gold standard. Cloth costumes, iconic characters. The scale, the texture, the simplicity. They were joy itself in plastic form. So when they made a comeback years later, I dove in head first. I collected everything, every wave, every obscure reissue. It was like reliving magic with a credit card. But then they never stopped coming. The releases kept stacking, the costs piled up, and soon the figures weren't going on display. They were going into bins, closets, storage. Then one day, I looked at a figure, some minor character I didn't care about, and said out loud, "Why the hell do I have this?" That was the crack in the spell. I realized I wasn't collecting out of joy anymore. I was collecting out of fear. Fear they'd disappear again. Fear I'd miss something. Fear I'd break the complete illusion. Not anymore. Now I choose what sparks, not what happens to be for sale. Chapter 10, The Ripple Map. Every great idea begins as a spark, a whisper, a sketch on scrap paper, a concept jotted in the margins of a school notebook, a passing thought that says, wouldn't it be cool if, and if it's honored, if it's followed, fed, and fought for, it ripples. Take Superman, Two Kids in Cleveland, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They had a vision, a hero, a symbol of hope wrapped in red, blue, and yellow. They created him not because they had a market plan, but because they needed him. And look what happened. Their spark became a ripple. That ripple became a wave. Comic books, radio plays, action figures, animated series, blockbuster films, shelves, shirts, lunchboxes. An idea that once lived in two boys' imaginations became a cornerstone of global mythology. And that's the pattern. One idea, honored with enough heart and consistency, can travel across decades and generations. It can shape-shift and expand and re-inspire. It can ripple into your life. That toy you held as a child, it wasn't just a product of a brand. It was the latest echo of someone else's spark. And if it meant something to you, it's because the ripple reached you. So the question becomes, what are you sending forward? If one figure on your shelf changed the way you saw yourself, what might happen if you created something that did the same for someone else? You don't have to be famous. You don't need a factory. You just need to honor the spark you're carrying now, because the ripple doesn't care about scale. It just cares about truth. And when you release that truth into the world, even in the smallest way, a drawing, a figure, a custom mod, a story, a blog post, you're continuing the map. You're passing the signal. You're becoming part of something ancient and electric and necessary. So here's a reminder. Everything you love was once just an idea. And every idea you have is a potential totem waiting to ripple forward. Send it. Maps are useless without choice. Here's where you step into authorship and pick your totems on purpose. Inspiration and invention. When the totem speaks, sometimes it hands you blueprints. If you've read this far, you probably picked up on it. My favorite figures of all time are in the 8-inch Mego style format. Always have been, always will be. So when I started learning 3D printing, it didn't take long for a familiar question to pop up. How can I make my Megos even better? That's when the idea hit. a custom action figure stand, one that didn't scuff the boots or damage the outfit, one that gave more flexibility in how I displayed the figures, not just stood them upright. And that's how the action pad stand was born. What started as a nostalgic itch turned into a functional, shareable, creatable tool, something born from play but executed with purpose. That's how ripples work. The figure taught me. The stand let me teach back. Welcome to Toys R Totems. If you've ever felt like life got too heavy, like the spark got buried, you're in the right place. I'm Jim Bumgardner, and this show is about using the things we loved, toys, characters, stories, as reminders of who we are and what we're capable of. Not nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, a tool for identity, meaning, and momentum. Here you'll get short episodes, real stories, and practical ways to reconnect with your creative core and spot the shadow patterns that try to steal it. If that hits you, subscribe and start with the playlist. Let's get your spark back.
Chapter 11, I Choose My Totems. Now this is where the power shifts. You've honored the past. You've looked at the shelf with new eyes. You've seen how the spark was planted and how the story unfolded. Now comes the part where you get to choose. Not by default, not because of marketing, not because everyone else is into it, but because it speaks to you, here, now, with who you are today. This chapter is about conscious collecting. This is where the shame dissolves and the clarity begins, where the clutter clears and your shelf becomes a reflection, not a distraction. You choose what stays, you choose what goes, you choose what speaks and what's just noise. And in doing that, your collection becomes a compass. Maybe you keep the figures that taught you bravery. Maybe you let go of the ones tied to scarcity or anxiety. Maybe you keep that one broken toy from your childhood because it still makes you smile. Maybe you display only 5 pieces instead of 50, but each one means something real. There's no right way to collect. There's only your way. And when you lean into that, the shame disappears. The need to explain disappears. All that's left is alignment. Totems are teachers, not trophies. And you are the student, the curator, the witness. So take a breath. Look around. Which ones still spark? Which ones still speak? Which ones deserve a front row in the story you're writing now? Choose them, arrange them, honor them, because you're not just collecting anymore, you're composing a life. Chosen totems demand embodiment. Let's move from shelf to self and test their wisdom in the real world. Inspiration over clutter. In the past 3 years, I've had to come to terms with the message of this chapter, and it wasn't easy. Breaking a habit seldom ever is. The decision to thin the herd of my obsession versus collection came less from the need for physical space as the need for mental and emotional space. Each piece that I had picked up over the past decade had some little glimmer of a memory associated it. Or I found it funny, but that's all that they were. Glimmers and a quick giggle. No depth, no connection, nothing. Let's get something straight right from the jump. This isn't about nostalgia. It's not about justifying your hobby to some smug outsider or turning your collection into an Instagram-worthy showroom. Nor is it about trying to recapture a childhood that's long gone. This is about remembering what you never really forgot, because that toy on your shelf is a memory with a purpose. That dented lunchbox, that beat-up action figure with the cape half torn, it's not just a collectible. It's a totem. A silent witness, a symbolic artifact of who you were, who you still are, and who you might dare to become. We live in a world that rewards the practical and punishes the playful. Grown adults are expected to trade. Let's get something straight right from the jump. This isn't about nostalgia. It's not about justifying your hobby to some smug outsider or turning your collection into an Instagram-worthy showroom. Nor is it about trying to recapture a childhood that's long gone. This is about remembering what you never really forgot, because that toy on your shelf is a memory with a purpose. That dented lunchbox, that beat-up action figure with the cape half torn, it's not just a collectible. It's a totem. A silent witness, a symbolic artifact of who you were, who you still are, and who you might dare to become. We live in a world that rewards the practical and punishes the playful. Grown adults are expected to trade curiosity for cynicism, imagination for efficiency, wonder for wisdom. But let me ask you something. What if the toy aisle was the last place you were ever truly honest about who you are? That's what this book is about. Not validation, liberation, reclaiming the spark, the totems, the truth. This is your permission slip to own what lights you up without apology or explanation. Because your collection? It's not clutter, it's code. A language of comfort, courage, identity, and memory, spoken in vinyl, resin, rubber, and articulation points. I'm not writing this as an expert or a guru. I'm writing this as a guy who once hid his collection behind closed doors because he thought professionals didn't play with toys. But I'll tell you what, I've seen grown men's eyes light up at the sight of a 1984 He-Man just like a kid on Christmas morning. Every time I set a figure on my desk, someone had a story to tell, a smile to remember, a spark to reignite. And that's the mission here, to light that spark in you. By the time we're done, you'll understand why that one figure keeps calling you back, why the thrill of the hunt is a form of prayer, why keeping your shelf isn't a sign of immaturity, it's a testament to survival, why putting away childish things doesn't mean purging play, it means letting go of ignorance. This is less a book about toys as it's really a book about you. Let's dig in. If the spark is real, where did it first flare up? Let's rewind to the plastic time machines that carried us there.
It's strange how some of the smallest things leave the biggest echoes. You might forget your first grade teacher's name, but you remember the feel of that Darth Vader figure's vinyl cape. You might not recall what you ate at your 10th birthday party, but you remember exactly how it felt when you picked out that Superman lunchbox, like choosing the vessel that would spirit you away to lunchtime and that peanut butter and jelly sandwich your mom packed. These weren't just toys, they were your first allies, your first therapists, your first mirrors.